Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of Being a Fan of Disney, the podcast. And I'm here today with Alan Babiarz-Lira, who right now is a PhD student at Regent University and soon to be an instructor of communication at Volunteer State Community College. He's going to be a fellow Tennessean about three-ish hours away from where we are outside of Memphis. And Alan is here because a few months ago, I joined one of the podcasts he works on, or he is a co-host, and talked about the release of Being a Fan of Disney, the book. And Alan and I had communicated before that because of Disnet, the Disney, I always get it wrong, the Disney Culture and Society Research Network, correct? I think that's the full name.
I think that's the proper name.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we've communicated for a long time about various things and made plans to record a show at various times and then didn't and then plans and didn't. So actually when we are recording this, this is during the Disnet conference. Now that's an online conference, so everybody is spread out around the world. And a big reason why we are recording it now is because Alan presented yesterday at Disnet on using the parks for teaching, and I want to talk about that. The other major reason why we have waited to record now is as part of his PhD program, he is he has developed and is producing a summer podcast series called Education and Entertainment, the podcast. And it's been fascinating. So we'll get into that and all the different areas that it covers. But first, Alan, welcome to class. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. You make me sound more interesting than I actually am. I just find that to be all busy work that I have to do to complete this degree. But it's been a fun journey. It's meeting Disney academics. I don't know about you, but I just came off of a session you were mentioning. We're really in the middle of the Disney conference right now. I just came off an hour-long session discussing queer coding characters and High School Musical. And I'm like, wow, I never thought in my life I'd be discussing High School Musical like that. However, when you find your group of people who can speak your language, so to speak, you all kind of come together and bring that. So yeah, your introduction of our kind of journey together, journey into imagination together,
Hmm.
as a pun on your background today, is absolutely right. We met in the academic field and going on and working on a couple projects together now, and actually one more that we'll talk about when we talk about for my program, when we get into the program. But I will I'll talk about that. But it's weird. It really is not, no pun intended. I know it's been used 1,000 times, but it really is a small world after all. And you never know who you're gonna meet in your life that you're gonna work with. So thanks for having me
Yeah,
on. I appreciate it.
yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. And it's been really interesting. Like I was telling someone earlier, I feel like my path to incorporating Disney into my research um, is different than a lot of other people that I've interacted with, like through the academic community, where um, am not, I didn't study communications, I didn't study media, I didn't study television or film, or any of the kind of more critical, I guess, fields that allow you to look like more critically at the products that Disney's doing. I kind of come from a business perspective. And so I started researching competition and rivalry and sport from there because of my love of Disney and because we had kind of through a series of studies and series of many, many works had come to this point where we said, hey, I want to start looking at how fans of brands feel toward their competing brand outside of the sport context. And so the first comparison study I did was how sport fans feel toward their rival team and how fans of Disney parks feel about Disney and about Universal. And then from there, it's just kind of grown, and um, I met people through the themed entertainment and academic society, and then theme academic and attractions academic society, sorry. And then now through Disnet. And whenever I meet people, I always kind of have this feeling like, oh, like people are going really in depth. Like people go much more in depth than like I am feel like I'm capable of going. I'm talking about like Disney streaming strategies and how they're using streaming to engage with fans. I'm talking about how people feel about, Marvel and DC and Star Wars and Star Trek. And I'm kind of over here like surface level. And then like there, everyone else is going super, super deep into kind of understanding what the textual readings are, what the theme parks mean, what the movies mean, which I find really, really interesting because it's a very fascinating area. And, I'm at a point where I feel like I've done a lot of what I've wanted to do. And now this is something else that like I want to pursue something, this kind of different area or take my research into a different area. So it's been really, really fascinating in that regard. So uh, the first question is kind of what is your origin story of Disney fandom? How did you start? How did you get started in the Disney fandom? What was your, introduction to it? Kind of take us up through today where you are someone who is getting a PhD in communication and you are deciding Disney is going to be, if not your main area, one of your primary areas of focus.
It was a dark and stormy night. All the no. No, no, let's go back. Yeah, no, my mother and I just had a conversation about this, which is kind of funny. This is how it left the impression on me. My mother would get together with her family on every Sunday night and watch The Wonderful World of Color, Wonderful World of Disney, whatever it was at the time. It changed names a couple times as they went through its tenure. Um, but her family, she would describe to me how her family would get together on Sunday nights and watch this show. This is what they watched together, and they enjoyed they had the Osmonds on and Barbara Eden and all these huge celebrities at the time, along with Walt, telling these stories that they could enjoy as a family. And before we jumped on this podcast today, I was telling you I grew up in a Hispanic family, and growing up in a Hispanic family, storytelling is so important. That's how you tell your story narratives. That's how you tell your family narratives, and there's still so many stories that I remember growing up that my grandmother told me that will just never leave my head. I'm just like, oh God, that stupid bird she told me about, and stuff like that. So growing up, I would listen to how my mom would describe this stuff, and I'm like, you know what? I guess as a kid, I would indirectly thinking, you know what? I want to enjoy this also. So she introduced me. I remember Mary Poppins was one of my first loves. We would watch that on TV together. The VHS, of course, we had the VCRs, and you pop the
Mhm.
VHS in at the time. Um, and we would watch Mary Poppins, and that's why I think um, Mary Poppins has a huge, huge, huge impact on my life. I got to meet we just lost this year Richard Sherman,
Mhm.
but I got to meet him once quite a while ago, and it was kind of one of like the greatest moments of my life. And listening to him tell these stories was incredible. So it started there. My first vivid memory that like I can vividly remember is sitting in a theater looking up, and it was the beginning of The Little Mermaid.
Hmm.
Um, the scene with the ship kind of crashing in, and like that I remember vividly seeing that on the big screen. That was 1989, so I would have been 4 years old. Um, and that would have been my introduction kind of into the theaters. I was very much a Renaissance child. I loved Aladdin, I loved Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, everything that came out. My family also, because I was an only a child. I kind of grew for most of my life. I was an only child, I should say. I grew up kind of around adults, so it gave them an excuse to take
Hmm.
and go see the Disney movies in the theaters as well, right? Because they had this nephew, or that they could take now with them. And so I loved like the Oliver and Company soundtrack because it had these
Hmm.
greats like Billy Joel and Bette Midler, and I knew all these at a young age, all these great artists, because that's what my family was listening to at the time. Again, very family oriented, same just like as in the Disney morals, the Disney values. Um, my teenage years, I kind of, that was around Mulan, Lilo and Stitch. I was growing cooler, I was growing older. I saw them, they weren't my favorite thing, like a cool teenager would be. Um, but then the actually, we're just listening to a panel on they called it the post-Renaissance TV era. So like High School Musical, Hannah Montana, the Jonas Brothers, when Jonas and that area of TV. You also had, going back a little bit more before that, you had Tailspin and Darkwing Duck, and I
Hmm.
loved all of that TV span within right there, between the 90s and the early 2000s. I fell in love with all of that. Um, Kept going, and then I got my degree in communication. I wanted to work at a huge company, like something like Walt Disney, doing PR and advertising. My undergrad is in communication and advertising and PR, and I wanted to do something like that. And then I decided, you know what? No, I don't. I was working in education. I was working on the student services side at the time. And I was like, you know what? No, I don't. I don't want to leave education. So my advisor at the time was like, well, you can teach this if you love it. And I'm like, you know what? I do love media. I do love communication. I do love how, again, going back to that storytelling affects everything. So I went back and I got my master's, and I started teaching. And that was a while. And I was teaching adjunct for 10, almost 10 years, nine, almost 10 years. And I'm sitting there looking at what was the difference between people getting jobs and me. And it was the fact that most of them had a PhD. So I'm like, you know what? Now's the time to jump in. I'm going to do this. So I jumped into a PhD program. However, I knew myself. I couldn't sit in the classroom all day and be in the classroom at night. So I had to find an online, a remote program, which I have luckily. We have to go to campus once a year for our residency, but I've been lucky enough to find professors who have supported me in letting me do Disney research, because I mean, coming up to somebody as a PhD student, you're like, you know what? I want to study this mouse. And that kind of sounds silly, in one aspect. And I honestly don't know if they've ever had people before who study Disney as much as I do now. However, it's what's gotten me through this program because it's keeping my interest and it's definitely a passion of mine.
Yeah. And
That's the long-winded answer, sorry.
no, no worries. You read people research what they enjoy. And in a lot of ways research to kind of find out something about themselves as well.
Hmm.
Um, one reason I got into rivalry and group behavior is I wanted to understand more, like why do I feel a certain way when I graduated from the University of Texas? Why do I feel a certain way when Texas is playing versus when, like Oklahoma or Texas A&M or someone else is playing? And right now, I don't know if you keep up with any of it in the world of college baseball. Tennessee defeated Texas A&M Monday night in the national champ in like the final baseball game. Um, the coach of Texas A&M was asked if he was going the earlier that day, the University of Texas, it was leaked that their baseball coach had been let go. And so the speculation was, okay, well, they're either going to try to go get the Tennessee coach or the Texas A&M coach. They're going to make it run it, either one of those. Monday night after the game, the Texas A&M coach was asked about it and kind of gave like a real, I don't know, a real awkward answer. Um, and said like basically no, he's not interested. Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon, it's announced like he is now the Texas baseball coach. So it adds to that rivalry in a year that Texas is joining the SEC and um, playing the villain role for sure. He
Yeah.
is, and they do in many ways. Um, so we do get into things that we're really interested in. And I that's at the beginning I kind of talked about. I have gotten more and more into um incorporating Disney into most things that I do professionally because of my interest in it. And
Mhm.
so I definitely can understand that. Now, um you said you were talked about Mary Poppins, and
Mhm.
I absolutely love Mary Poppins. But here's the interesting thing to me about Mary Poppins. Did it scare you as a kid? Because there were parts of it that scared me.
It was a dark, dark movie. And I've seen all the YouTube videos because there's quite a few YouTube videos on this theory and how dark Mary Poppins is. And I wasn't scared. I was I don't want this to sound really bad, but I was like an oblivious child. I was just happy about everything. I was watching. I was like, oh, a spoon. It went into, she poured one and it was green, and she poured the other one and it was red, and I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
To other people, oh, that's scary. That's witchcraft. I could see and understand that. So I will say as a child, no, I kind of enjoyed everything. I really wasn't. Um, I'm more scared as an adult, I will say.
Yeah.
Things
The,
are frightening me a little bit more as an adult, but that probably should have scared me more as a child. But no, I loved Mary Poppins. I think because she had such a maternal and motherly like persona, yet she was such a badass and a hard ass,
yeah.
she was strict on the Banks kids and said, you know what, I'm gonna be here until the wind changes. That's it. That's as long as you're gonna need me. Get used to it, and that's it. And that's all it was, you know?
And see, so when I was afraid not of, I didn't even think about any of the pouring liquid and potions and witchcraft or anything. I was scared of the scenes at night when there's one in particular, I can't remember what it is, where like they're confronted by um a woman who is that the woman who ends up being uh, the bird lady, I think
The
so.
bird lady,
But
yeah.
like they're confronted, like that scared me. And so Mary Poppins has kind of become this movie to me that as a kid, like I would watch 85, 90% of it, and then like that part I would either try to fast forward or like close my eyes. um and so
Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was going to ask if you had gotten a chance to watch Saving Mr. Banks yet.
Yes. And so that is one of my favorite
Yes.
Disney movies. That and so the original Mary Poppins, I sing the music almost all the time, but it's been a very long time since I've seen the movie. I don't watch that movie very much, but I
Mhm.
always sing the music. I love Saving Mr. Banks. That was a great, great movie. I'm not sure how historically accurate. I mean, again, we were talking earlier before we started recording. It is a Disney movie about how a Disney process. So, they are going to make
Mhm.
sure the corporate language is in there and the corporate speak and everything. Um, and I loved when Mary Poppins Returns came out.
Mhm.
That is actually one of my favorite movies, and I enjoy it more than Mary Poppins because when I saw Mary Poppins Returns, that's kind of when I first started to fully kind of engulf into or jump into like this Disney fandom that like I'm like, oh, I have a professional reason to do this now. Like I could spend hours upon hours upon hours researching all this stuff. I'm gonna do it.
Mhm.
And so I had read how happy people were at the studio when Mary Poppins was being made. So to me, I was like, it's so fun to be a consumer when a Mary Poppins movie is coming out. And so I really, really latched on to Mary Poppins Returns and Saving Mr. Banks. So interestingly, like the order of those three movies to me are probably Mary Poppins Returns, Saving Mr. Banks, then interestingly, Mary Poppins, even though like that's the music that started everything for me.
Absolutely. And and you made a few good points there that I would like to hit on. But first of all, again, 100% my opinion. But I think that John Krasinski and Emily Blunt are a power couple that can do no wrong. Everything that they do is brilliant. She could do comedy, she can do drama, she can do like I loved her in Jungle Cruise. I loved her in Mary Poppins Returns. Who knew she could sing? Like she's wonderful. So yeah, no, Emily Blunt was the perfect choice, I feel, for in my very, very unbiased opinion, as you could tell. Um, but no, absolutely. And the dark scenes that you brought up, we really came to understand in Mary Poppins Returns because we learned that relationship that P.L. Travers had
Hmm.
with her father. It was so dark and it was so, like she loved him so much, but he was an alcoholic and he was just trying to get through and trying to make ends meet for his family, but his drinking problem just caused all these problems for them, and it just made Mary Poppins that itself make sense.
Yeah.
It made Mary Poppins itself make sense so much that I went back and I read the original volumes after Saving Mr. Banks came out, and I'm like, wow, there's so much. And then they used a lot of that also in Mary Poppins Returns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, there's those are three great pieces of art I think that the Walt Disney Company has put out.
Yeah. To transition a little bit to another movie, um, and you're wearing a um wilderness explorer, sorry, baseball jersey, from Up. You have a very I would listen to another podcast that your
Oh, I thought you
podcast,
were going to say I
Disney
have a
Night
very
Live.
interesting wardrobe, which is true. I do have a very interesting wardrobe. So,
You have, so when I was listening to Disney Night Live, you have a very interesting story about why Up is your favorite movie or favorite Pixar movie,
Pixar.
that deals with the first date of your what would turn out to be your husband.
I didn't know that
What
at the
is that
time.
story? Because I have it was fascinating to me because of the makeup of the movie. So
Yeah,
so what was the story of that?
It is real interesting because, we've had this conversation before, a couple of times. And I've had this with more people than you, but the first, was it 15, 20 minutes of that movie is the most depressing thing you've seen in your life. You're like, the very, very first time I saw it, I was bawling like a baby, right? I'm like, true love was right there, and then all of a sudden you just took it away from me? Like, what is
Yeah.
going on here? No, 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 no. They're gonna go to Paradise Falls together. This is gonna work out,
Yeah.
don't worry. And then she dies. And then you're just like, oh, and then of course, we get this great story of the relationship between Russell and Carl. But it was interesting. I had just met. And I don't think I told you this part of the story. I had just met Ed Asner, the late great R.I.P. Ed Asner, and he was the freaking funniest man ever. Like we were going through, and I was the last person in line, and I handed him my Up DVD, and he goes, "Oh, you're one of them Disney fans, are you?" Just messing with me. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, Mr. Eisner, I am. And he goes, no, 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 Ed, Ed. And so he personalized my Up DVD for me and he signed it. And so that had just happened like a week or two before. And so it was still out on the table. And like you said, what my now husband, Marcos, had come over and we were gonna make dinner and watch the movie, and he's like, "Oh, Up, I love that movie." And I was like, "Oh yeah, put it on, right?" And put it on, and then like it's just dead silence for the first 20 minutes. Neither of us are saying anything. And this is like our first like date, like together alone, like because we had gone out to dinner and like a bar and stuff. But so this is our first like intimate date. Um, or first like date solo, and again, just the first 20 minutes of being quiet, like, this is really depressing. And then we
Yeah.
got through the movie, of course, and we laugh about it today, and it's both of our favorite Pixar movies because it means so much to us now. But it I guess it tells the story of true friendship, and it does tell, you know, the love between these two friends, this father figure and this son figure. But even though it's not with Ellie, there's still love in there.
Yeah. And it was just like when I heard it, the thing that stuck out to me is like that I'm picturing going to see it in a theater and like the first time either person has seen it and you walk out, it's like, what do you talk about? Because like that was that's a pretty like, that beginning was a pretty dark beginning to that movie. So it does make more sense like when you explained it a little bit more, but it's still such a fascinating thing to me that I'm like, that's the the again, I was thinking like kind of blind date type thing where it's like, hey, let's go to a movie and oh, look, the newest Pixar movie's out. Let's go see it. And then you
You
walk out, you're
know,
like, oh my goodness, that's an interesting one to start on.
and it's like you mentioned earlier with Mary Poppins. If you haven't seen it in such a while, you're like, oh, I forget that this happens. I
Yeah.
forget that that happens. And I think that was one of the things. You remember the end, and you remember all the good stuff that happens, and of course, Kevin. You gotta love Kevin. And then, but you try to black out the first 20
Yeah.
minutes, I think.
Yeah. Um, so next, what is your specific area of Disney that you are researching? Where do you think you will like where your research will go? Where will it develop over the years that you foresee?
So I think my area of expertise is becoming, quote unquote, I'll leave it there because it'll probably change about 984 more times. But it is becoming the parks. I got my first publication acceptance this year, and it's an article where I analyzed the very first employee newsletter of Walt Disney World, which was really interesting because I found the original editor and I stalked him on LinkedIn and Facebook and all these other social medias. And I was able to connect with him, and we had this great conversation, and he was, able to tell me why certain things went in, what certain things didn't go in, why it was cut, why the certain pictures were chosen and everything, and he was able to remember all these details, which was
Hmm.
fantastic for me as a historian. I was taking a historical research class at the time, so that's why I had to do a critical analysis of an artifact. And that's what really got me jump started into um, theme parks and researching the theme parks, the Disney theme parks in general. I've dabbled a little bit in everything. When I took history of communication, I was like, well, what can I talk about that's, I can't just be like, oh, hey, Walt did great things in history. So I talked about how communicate or how animation impacted communication, and going back to Steamboat Willie, the first um, cartoon with a soundtrack that's lined up and all this other things. And I'm like, you know what? This is great. I was able to take that and turn it into a class at my former university that I taught at. And I taught the history of communication through animation, through Disney's animation, a few semesters ago. So the dabbling in a little bit of research has been, and all over the company, I guess, has been, beneficial to me. But I think I love the storytelling of the parks the most. One project I'm working on is place attachment to Magic Kingdom. And another one that I'm working on is I'm thinking once I get to the dissertation, I'm almost there, knock on wood. Um, I want to talk about how the parks narrate a story, right? So
Mhm.
as you are going through Haunted Mansion, we'll talk about the one in Walt Disney World. You
Okay.
leave the attic scene right there, and then you're turning around, and then you're going 6 feet under into the cemetery, and like people don't realize that's the illusion of you going 6 feet under into the cemetery. I was lucky enough to go to Paris last summer. After that cemetery scene, you keep going down into what it's like in the underworld. So like that's such a unique narration that I'd love to tell a little bit more about through my research. But like I said, um, it might be about 964 different ways, but we'll see what happens when I get there. But I think so far parks research has been my favorite.
So one thing that's been so interesting to me about the parks and about the storytelling of the parks is there is great storytelling of the parks. And one thing I really appreciate about going to a Disney park, especially we'll focus on Disneyland and Magic Kingdom, um, is it's supposed to be like say it's supposed to be like a movie set. You walk or like a movie premiere, sorry. You walk up
Mhm.
and you see Walt Disney's name, the first name that you see because he's the director, and you walk underneath um the train tracks,
Space
and there
station,
are
yeah.
kind of like the movie posters of
Hmm.
and you walk out into Main Street USA, and the cement is red because it's a red carpet. And when you walk down Main Street USA and you see all the names on the windows, that's supposed to be like the opening credits. And then you see Walt Disney's name is last, that you would see before you get to the hub. And then when you're leaving, it would be reversed because it's always the director is first and the director is last, when you watch opening movie credits and or closing movie credits, as it was when they focus more on closing. Sorry. Um, and you get into the different lands, and I love telling people the story of Liberty Square, and why does the concrete look different? Why are the shutters on the door on the buildings? Why do they kind of
Why does the
hang and things like
concrete
that?
look different, Cody?
I love taking my, I don't know if it probably won't work again, but the last time we went was in 2021 to Magic Kingdom. And I told my boys, hey, walk in the middle. And then I tell them, I'm like, well, that is because that's where everybody would just dump their remains. And they're like, you mean, you mean that? I'm like, yeah, like, that's kind of gross. But then, also being, they kind of laughed at it too. Like it's not the reaction that you get sometimes. Um,
Mhm.
but with two boys. But
And that's why there's no bathrooms in Liberty Square either.
see, I did not know there. I never noticed there were no bathrooms, but you're right.
Yes, there
Because
are
you
no
have to
bathrooms in
walk
Liberty
to,
Square.
because
Yes.
yes, we've had to make a dart over um to Frontierland
So
so we could go
no
to the
promos
bathroom.
or anything about this, but if you get a chance to take a tour, anybody, your listeners, anybody, I definitely recommend taking the Disney tours. I've done a few. I've done Marceline Magic Kingdom, and I did the Keys to the Kingdom. And that was one of the facts that I learned in Keys to the Kingdom was there is no bathrooms in Liberty Square
Hmm.
because of that.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Thank you. I don't even take the tour. Um, I just just talk to you the whole time.
You get
Um,
you get you get lunch at Pecos Bills. Hey,
and well, that's another example. Like Pecos Bill, all of these stories coming from the movies and the projects, and how the park and parks were used to promote their IP, which is why it's always so interesting to me now when people like complain about IP being too much IP being in the parks. Like they were always in the parks. Like you just didn't realize it because IP really wasn't, that wasn't part of our lexicon then. Like we weren't talking about it like we are now. The thing that has fascinated me is I want to know the story behind why something is somewhere, why that bridge looks the way it does, why, you cross over a bridge in a waterway when you walk between France and the United Kingdom and the World Showcase. I want to know those things. A lot of people don't. And so the Disney parks are something that you can go and you can just enjoy being at the park and enjoy going on the attractions and seeing these different things. Also, if you are a fan who wants to go deeper, and maybe it is your 50th time or 100th time or whatever, there are always story details that you can pick up on that are not seen by everyone else. And that has always been fascinating to me. And I have one more thought, but I'm going to get your thoughts on that before I say more.
no, no, I was going to completely agree. My first Disney park, I was 16. So I was pretty much an adult when I went to my first Disney park. I wasn't lucky enough to be taken as a kid, you know. But it, got to experience it through, I think, a different lens, which brought me a different kind of experience because I really immersed myself in the storytelling at
Mhm.
that point. As a kid, I'd be immersing myself in the rides and the fun and that, and no, as a 16-year-old, I was like, wow, look at the castle, look at this, look at that. And my first park was Disneyland. So
Yeah.
glad it was Disneyland and not Disney World. But that's neither here nor there. But we get these different storytelling and narrative experiences every time we go. And now, as you know, as an adult and I make adult money, I can buy an annual pass and I can go down there. And now that I'm going to be living in Tennessee, it's much closer. But
And the flights from
yeah,
Nashville, very quick. If you
there
want to
we
fly,
go.
very quick and affordable.
Even better. but I'm able to go now and, like, he's as you were saying, see these people, see the guests immerse themselves as you're going through Andy's backyard in Hollywood studios. Many people, again, this is part of that storytelling and narrative we were just talking about. You're shrinking down to the size of a
Mhm.
toy, right? You're in Andy's backyard as a toy. The plants that we have there look just like regular plants. They actually represent blades of grass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wow, that is a giant blade of grass. That's not a plant, that's a blade of grass. And then you see very, very discreetly these giant footprints, and you're like, what is this here? And then you're like, oh, it's a
Yeah.
footprint. And you see Andy's footprint back there. So it's these storytelling details, this attention to detail that I feel is so important to the theme parks that makes that immersive experience for the guest.
Yeah.
If that, yeah.
I one note on that. I absolutely love Toy Story Land. I think one thing they should probably do, they should probably let the grass grow a little bit longer to have more shade. I know they have started putting up more things to shade the area. I hear that complaint a lot, is that it is
Yes.
just so hot. But the theming there is amazing. The theme, and here's the other thing that that I fascinates me, and this is for me, um, we've now been part of different conferences, podcasts, panel, whatever. Um, I like to talk.
Mhm.
I like to have people. Who's up? I like to have people um, or tell people everything that I know. And I think it's fascinating to me that as an Imagineer and as a storyteller, it's almost like I would want people to know, like have like a description when you walk into Toy Story Land. When you're walking in here, you are shrinking down to the size of a toy. And this is the story. So you can live the
Mhm.
story. When you're walking into Liberty Land, like have these little like almost plaques around that would tell this story. But at the same time, I think that would take away from the theming of everything. And I think would actually take people out of it might allow some people to further kind of get into like the role play, but
Mhm.
um that's just always been fascinating to me that a lot of the stories that are told through the theme parks, 95, 97% of people who go to the parks have no idea what those
Mhm.
are. I've been lucky enough to have Brian Collins on a few times, who when he worked with Walt Disney Imagineering, one of the major things he did, he wrote the script for um the Jungle Cruise, like um the radio program in the queue
Mhm.
for the Jungle Cruise when they redid that. Um and he was telling me about that and I'm like, I've never paid attention to those type of details. And so it's a very I wonder what that feeling is that you have put in all of this work and you've put in this great detail, and 2 or 3% of the people who go are going to recognize that and truly appreciate that. And on some level, that's kind of could be frustrating. On another level, it's completely fascinating that it's like, well, here are like the deeper you go, here's something else. So, and it's kind of that idea to keep people coming back. I know
It,
that has
you
always
know that
fascinated me about it.
And there's always that idea of people don't want to know what's behind the magic.
Yeah,
People don't want to know it. And if you are one of those people, I don't recommend taking the tourist end, because you
yeah,
do get to go backstage and the utilidors. Don't tell anybody, but I got to see an Elsa, and she was just wearing the wig. She was not wearing the outfit. It was very weird. She's in day clothes with the wig. So you do get to see some of the stuff that breaks the magic, we'll say. And sometimes I guess, what you're describing would break some of the magic for some of the people, but genuinely, for those who are inquisitive, like you and I'm very, very interested. Actually, funny, Bill Francisco, who was the guy who I found who edited the very first employee newsletter, was the guy who wrote the verbiage that's actually on the dedication plaque on
Oh,
of Magic Kingdom.
cool.
So he was working for Roy at the time, and Roy was just like, "Hey, write this."
Very
Boom.
cool.
And so he was, able to tell the story. And looking at that plaque there, like, you would never know that. I would never know that. And obviously, I didn't know that until he told me that. And so, of course that's the kind of stuff that I love and I want to keep telling through my research, hopefully.
Yeah.
And lucky enough, next semester, my next semester is my in the fall is my last semester of coursework. I'm taking a cultural Disney studies course, which is actually kind of neat. I don't know if they specifically built it for me, but I'm not complaining about taking a Disney course my last semester. Just saying. Just saying. However, I do know the author of one of the textbooks. I do know him very well.
If
I'll give you a hint. His last name rhymes with Schmaverd.
and if you when you're reading, if you find mistakes and you let me know, I've made the joke multiple times that people are probably tired of hearing of it. The way I published that book, I can repeatedly go back and fix edits and fix mistakes. And so I've told people there are enough mistakes in that book, grammatical, spelling, otherwise, that if everyone who read the book told me and I made that change right away, the next person would get have like a different copy and the next person would have everyone would have their own unique copy of that book because there are enough grammatical and spelling errors in that book that the last thing that I find so interesting about the storytelling of theme parks, and then we'll talk about what you presented on yesterday, using the parks for teaching purposes. Um, we are those people who like to see behind the scenes. What's interesting now is we've taken our boys to Walt Disney World. Um, my oldest has been three times, my youngest has been two times now. We all went to Disneyland this last summer. And I talk about things so much that they kind of straddle the line between they can like not see behind the scenes and enjoy it that way, but they're starting to get more interested in seeing behind the scenes. So, interested in hey, why is this here? Why like and and I've talked to them about, I could go to the Magic Kingdom and probably not ride a ride the whole day and just walk around. And now, like, my youngest son's like, oh, I could do that too. I'm like, I'm not really sure. Like, those rides are pretty fun. You remember? Um, like, but one thing that was just so like, as a father, just such a cool experience this last summer. Have you been on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway at Disneyland?
Not Disneyland. I've
Okay.
only done Disney World.
So, Disney in Hollywood Studios, it is in the Chinese theater. You
Mhm.
walk in, and there's not a lot of difference in the Chinese theater. In the queue, there are now posters and everything. And it's really, really fun to look at. And it definitely fits because you're in this movie theater and everything. Well, in Disneyland, the ride is in Toontown. And so I think I'm gonna mess it up. I can't remember what they call it. It's either a play
The
on
El
Parque
Capit
Theater. Yeah, El
the El
Capitan. That's it. El
Capitan.
Capitan Theater. The
Yes.
El Capitan Theater. When you walk in, I don't know if you've watched videos of the queue. The rides are the same. The queue at Disneyland
Mhm.
is amazing. It's all these props, from the Mickey stories. And we're walking through, and I'm looking at all these, and I'm telling the boys like, "Oh, I remember watching that. I remember watching that." You know, it's so cool. Like I watched Mickey's Christmas Carol so much that
Mhm.
like when I got to that section and could see like uh his table that he sat at and stuff, is really cool. But there was one time where my youngest son, and in a few years, I don't think he may not admit this. So I want to, this is one of those memories I want to hold on for as long as possible. Um, we walked past a costume, like in the queue kind of wrapped around this costume in a clear case. And he looks at me and he says, "Is that really what he wore in the show?" And immediately it was just like this wave of emotion. Like it's like a wave of emotion anytime I think about it. That I'm like, here it is. Like as an adult, I can allow myself to suspend reality and believe that where these props were used and everything. But here's where that magic is. Like that was a genuine question. It was amazing. It was one of my favorite like memories of the trip. Um, that memory of being in Disneyland the first time both boys were at Walt Disney World and in the Imagination Pavilion, seeing them play in the Image Works the way I did when I was a kid, albeit I had a lot more things to do in Image Works when I was a kid. Those are memories that I want to hold on to for as long as possible because I'm like, that is what people mean when they say the words Disney magic. It was incredible. It was such a
That's
cool experience to have that.
Yeah, and as a dad being able to experience that through your child's lens, I could just imagine because I've had experiences like that as an adult. I have been so lucky to have made some great connections over the years through Disney people, and I've been lucky enough to be invited onto the Burbank set, the Burbank
Okay.
Studios set. And my first time there, I was on an official tour and our tour guide was giving us and he took us upstairs and he's like, "All right, this is it. We're about to go into Walt's office." And now I was going back to the beginning, towards the beginning of this episode, telling you how important Mary Poppins was to me. Well, we learn in Saving Mr. Banks that Feed the Birds was Walt's favorite song, and
Hmm.
he would ask them to come down and play the piano every Friday and everything. And so as we're walking in, I see the piano and I asked the tour guide and I'm like, is this the Sherman Brothers piano? And he goes, yeah, this is it. And like seriously, just emotional tears came over me. But like
Yeah.
I could just picture like I had chills thinking of Walt sitting in like that corner and Richard Sherman just sitting there playing, and I'm just like I could just picture it. So, seeing that as a kid, you're like, is this what I remember? Like this movie I used to watch with my dad and my family, and it's making those connections that I think is so important in that Disney storytelling.
Yeah.
Going back again to like I was saying, my family in the 50s and 60s watching The Wonderful World of Color, and The Wonderful World of Disney. Disney has been that company and telling that story for 100 years now,
Yeah.
101. So absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating like the kind of how much you can get into the stories, how much you can get into the parts, what you can get out of it. You can get out of it as much as you want. Which is an attempt to transition to your work on using the parts to teach. Yesterday you talked about using Epcot to teach different things. Um, briefly, because I do want to get to, we need to get to the podcast also. Um, what is what is your research telling you about how we can better use the parks as a teaching mechanism?
Well, I think if we could take a 30-second step back and give your audience a kind of a definition of what entertainment education is. It's using entertainment, any type of entertainment, to create any kind of social change or educate an audience. We saw it in TV shows, in movies, music, and especially within Epcot. Epcot was that experimental prototype community of tomorrow, that community that Walt wanted to build, that we know never came to fruition. However, the people that did bring the park to life brought this edutainment aspect. And you can use edutainment and entertainment education interjectively. It's the same thing. But there is an aspect of, while you are enjoying and being entertained, you are also being taught lessons and being
Mhm.
taught things that you could take back to your own real life. The newest exhibit that they have in there is the Moana's Journey of Water, that tells, the story of how people can save the water and, do all these great things with water recycling, and why it's important when it rains so we can reuse that kind of water in our gardens and things of that nature, while walking through and getting an immersive experience. And some of the kids can get wet, and you kind of get misted, and you guests don't realize that they're being taught lessons
Yeah.
while they're enjoying this. Um, and Epcot was pretty much built around that whole concept. So that's why Epcot's the most important, I would say, in the theme park industry for entertainment education.
And one of the really interesting things to me, the history of Epcot was, yes, the original intent was to be a living, working community. Um, and that was actually a major reason why the Florida legislature made the kind of the concessions they did to the Walt Disney Company, is to build this and to kind of see this idea through. Now, so when the company built Epcot, from my understand or the way I understand it is, yes, they wanted to build a second park, but it was also like they were required to build that. They had to figure out how to build this park that was kind of part of the original plan, and part of the concessions for being moving into the state. And so the way that they then discussed it was, okay, people are no longer going to live in mass at Epcot. Now it's going to be people come and they learn at Epcot, and they take those lessons other places around the world. And when Epcot first opened, it was called Epcot Center, which was in a very confusing verbiage. Epcot Center was all of Walt Disney World. And then there was the theme park Epcot Center, and then there were individual Epcot centers around the world, like these little research areas, like one being Living with the Land, the professor from Arizona State University that helped to kind of show what the future of cultivation, not really the future now, but what cultivation was going to look like. Um, and then they they kind of changed that narrative to like, okay, this is no longer, people aren't going to live and work here in mass. Now they're going to learn here, and they're going to leave. And then I also have learned that the company will at least tell, and I think this works, or it seems like it works, they have fulfilled their agreement or fulfilled their kind of promise that people do live at Epcot, because some of the apartments where the international students live that are working in the pavilions are technically on like Epcot property in that Epcot resort area. So then they kind of say like, well, the people are living there. So it does
Yeah.
fulfill that as well. Um, Epcot being such a fantastic place to learn from, give two or three quick examples of You already talked about the way of water or the journey of water, but two or three quick examples of what people can learn from being at Epcot.
Believe it or not, okay, so my favorite thing to do at Disney, we all have a favorite thing to do, but my favorite thing to do it is at Disney is eat and drink everything that they have.
Mhm.
I want to sample what you got, you sweet, savory, you name it, I want it. Except I don't like olives. So if it has olives in it, no, we're not going there. What we can learn from the international festivals that they bring us every year, especially the Food and Wine Festival. You're able to sample food from different cultures around the world, right? You're able to taste these different dishes and drink these certain drinks that you wouldn't traditionally been able to unless you go to that country. During the festival of the arts, they hold drawing classes where people can go and try to learn how to draw some of their favorite characters. And they also have live art displays where and now I sound like an ad for the festivals, but no, they also have live art displays where people can, learn how to paint, learn how to draw. And some of my favorite art that they do there, because Festival of the Arts, I think, is my second favorite festival behind Food and Wine, because I told you I like to eat. But Festival of the Arts, they have the live art. So they've got like tumblers and performance art, and there's these great, live pieces that the people can learn from. Festival of the Holidays. People think, you learn about Father Christmas and some of the Jewish traditions and just Christmas around the world that you may not have learned there before. Living with the land, as you were mentioning, gives you what at the time was the most modern ways of and methods of farming, and we still see some of the stuff that's grown in those gardens used in like Garden Grill and
Mhm.
restaurants around Epcot. And then, most specifically, World Showcase, teaches the different culture, different architecture from around the world. And it's turning back to the way it was pre-pandemic, which I really appreciate because everybody who worked there was from their respective
Mhm.
countries. Of course, during the pandemic, when borders were closed and everything, people couldn't travel. But um, recently, it's beginning to come into fruition again. So I appreciate, going into Mexico and being able to speak Spanish with
Mhm.
one of the people or anything, just as an example. And then of course, my favorite, just because of my background, Spaceship Earth tells you that the history of
Yeah.
communication and why you could honestly argue why the company's there because it goes all the way into
Mhm.
media, into the computer and animation and the movies over there towards the end. So yeah, I think there's a lot that you can learn from
Yeah.
um,
And
Epcot. And if not, you can always learn some great rock and roll from Gardens of the Galaxy.
yeah, yeah.
Guardians of the
Um,
Galaxy over there.
the and we've yet to beyond that yet, where we haven't gone back since that's been open. The what was known as the education park, it still is known as the education park. I love Space Mount. I'm sorry, I love Spaceship Earth, like you said, and it does definitely make sense with communication. That when you said that, that's what I was thinking. Is like, well, this is a communication company. This is entertainment. How do they communicate with each other? And as you could tell by my background, my favorite pavilion was always Imagination, Journey into Imagination. Even now, when I go on it, even though the ride is a shell of what it used to be, but it's still my opportunity to hear the music, to see Figment, and it's exciting that they brought Figment back as a character you could take pictures
Mhm.
with, and um, I don't know unless they're I don't know if I would stand in line for a long period of time to take a picture
You
because
know, it's
that's
not bad. I've done it like 3 or 4 times and I've never waited more than like 20 minutes.
oh really? Because
Yes.
see, one thing like because one thing that we're able to do, we're able to at certain parks go and take pictures. Like you don't know who the characters are going to be, but like it's special access to take pictures with those characters. And so
Hmm.
one like at Disneyland, it was Darth Vader, which was pretty cool. One time it was Pluto and Donald and Goofy and all, and I was like, whoa, this is really really cool. Like that you get this experience. Um, that if it was that, like that would be no problem. If I'm
Yeah.
standing for like 30, 40 minutes, an hour, I'm not real sure about that. But
No, when he first came back, it was long, but my recent trips and I'm May was my last trip. I think I said like it was 15, 20 minutes. It wasn't bad.
okay. So it was not the 6 hour wait for the popcorn bucket when it first came out.
It
That's
was
good to
not, no, luckily,
know.
no.
So the other reason that we waited to talk now is you have Entertainment Education, the podcast, which is it's a limited series during primarily during the summer months, where you go over different aspects of entertainment and what you can learn and how entertainment can be used to teach and encourage cultural or in, encourage change and things like that. Talk a little bit about that. The episodes that have come out. I know we're what at episode 4 is about to be released.
Episode 4 is about to be released, and episode 5 was just recorded. It has one of my guest hosts. He was probably the worst guest host that I've had this whole time. He was so rude to me. No, 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 I
He is definitely
can't.
the most talkative. Yes, he was definitely the most talkative, I
You
could
know
say.
what? You know what? I cannot say yes or no to that because everybody has been, but you know what? Put a bunch of communication people
Yeah.
and people who love what they do together and they don't shut up. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about it. Entertainment Education, the podcast, was born out of an idea that I had that I wanted to do something interesting and creative in the entertainment education field because A, the research is not current that is out there. And B, it is so interesting to me how a media company, again, because I have so much passion for Disney, how Disney can teach. How can Disney teach a whole, a whole generation and a whole field of people. So I took a course called The Influence of Entertainment on Communication, which was basically an entertainment education course. And I came out of it and I proposed to the professor. I proposed to him, I was like, hey, I'm thinking I want to do, and he's very much a media hands-on. He likes making videos for the classes and everything. And I was like, I want to do this limited run podcast where we talk about different aspects of entertainment education, gives the basics, what it is, and then each episode will specifically focus on a different aspect of media and how it teaches. So episode 1 was the basics, and that included my professor, and we had a great time. Episode 2, we talked about music. I had on the director of student media at St. Xavier University, where I used to work, and we talked about Live Aid and We Are the World and Willie Nelson's Farm Aid and how music has impacted. And also thinking back to when we were kids, these shows where music was used to teach us how to tie your shoes and things of like that nature. Nursery rhymes, how effective music is for that. Episode 3 then went into movies, which is out now. And movies, we talked about not only movies about education, like Dead Poet Society, but also movies that you could learn from. Lion King, tells such a story of leadership, and we see Simba come back and learn to be the inner leader that he is. Episode 5 is going to deal with something that I know very much, or sorry, very little about. However, my co-host did, Dr. Cody T. Havard. We talked about sports and entertainment education and how athletes, not only athletes, but how we can learn from being on a team. We can learn from athletes. We can learn from their actions and what being in a fandom truly means. Episode 6, we're going to talk about health, and not only like Grey's Anatomy kind of health. Yeah, you can learn from Grey's Anatomy. There is a center at UCLA where you can study with formal doctors on storylines that you're writing as a writer.
Hmm.
So you can, go research breast cancer or whatever
Mhm.
you're doing on that episode. So we're going to focus on that. And my guest host that day is also, she is a former MTV host. She did a MTV reality show and she does fitness segments for NBC5 now, or NBC now. And then episode 7 is going to focus on social media and how we are shifting, obviously, now to social media and learning. And then our final episode of the season is going to end up talking about our favorite thing. And you, my friend, are joining me once again. And we are also going to be joined by Dr. Robin Meir, who is going to be talking about princesses. You're going to be bringing the Disney aspect to it, and I'll be talking about theme parks. And we'll bring that trifecta effect and how that Disney can educate and end the season that way. So
Yeah.
it's been exciting. It's been fun. I'm about halfway through working on this project and have made some not only great connections but great conversation. And I've learned so much from other people that it's been honestly just such a great experience.
That has been one of the coolest and most rewarding things about this class and the class starting the podcast and I write about it. I talk about it in the podcast. I've written about it in the book that for me, getting to meet people that have all of these experiences, whether it is fans that moved to Orlando to be closer to the parks, whether it is you introduced me to people to talk about Taylor Swift, whatever, like
Mhm.
talking to people who used to work with the company, talking to people who study aspects of the company like you do. It's very, very interesting. And it is I think it is such a great model for what it means to be like an academic or to have
Mhm.
a PhD. I think everyone can be an academic if they want. My view on what a PhD is it is kind of a symbol that you want to learn for the rest of your life. Like that's what you want to do. You want to learn different aspects and you want to try and help develop some of the learning around those different areas. Um, but it very much it rather my view is rather than it being representing like someone who knows everything about a topic. It's no, it's somebody who knows how much they don't know about a topic and how much they want to learn about a topic and I think everybody has the ability and opportunity to be a true academic in the sense if they want that learning new things and being able to do that has been really, really rewarding. So I completely understand that aspect of the podcast project. You have another podcast that you were on. It's also a live show that you've been on for a long time, Disney Night Live. You want to talk
Oh
about that a little
gosh.
bit?
A long time. Gosh, don't remind me. I'm only 21. What are you talking about? No. uh, no, Disney Night Live started as a passion project of a few friends of mine. It's actually a Facebook group, so if you go join us, it's called Now That's Disney on Facebook. We do a live show. It used to be on Saturday nights. Now we're on Wednesday nights, and we also take it and put it on a podcast. However, now that I am working on my PhD, I don't have as much free time as I used to, so I'm not able to join my friends every week as much as I should, or as much as I would love to. How about that? But however, join my friends, Dave Pachano, the Pachanos, they're fantastic people, and they, talk about different aspects of the show tonight. They are talking to Tiki Man Steve about some of the Polynesian updates that are coming up. They got the Polynesian DVC tower that's going up right now as we speak, as this podcast is being recorded. And but so the Poly's got some cool things. And the Poly's a special place in my heart. Very, very side note because I got married at the Poly, but
Oh,
I do
really?
love the Poly. I did.
That's the first and really one of the very few Disney hotels I've ever stayed at. When I went as a kid, we stayed there and we actually like it was you could drive these little boats around as kids and like no adults in there and like they had like life jackets, something attached to the life jacket, like if you fell out it was gonna stop. It was like run like on a basic a little bit more than a lawnmower engine, like they didn't go fast and all that. They were but yeah, I have very fond memories of the Polynesian that I haven't been back since. Now when we go, we're typically trying to get into the parks. I try to schedule like a resort day, but we typically, if we're staying on property, we typically stay at our resort and then go to Disney
Yeah.
Springs. We need to, as the boys get older, kind of hop around a little bit and see some different things. Although
See, now
I am a little afraid that maybe that would people would be like, "Oh, I really want to stay here," and it would always be like, "Well, this is the most expensive resort here, like we're not going to be staying here. Let's stay where we stay."
there's three resorts that I have not stayed at yet. And there's a reason why I have not stayed there yet, just because their price. But I'll get there one day. One day, it'll be worth the celebration. But now that the boys are getting older, that's the good thing about resort hopping is they'll be more now into the food and snacks and stuff. Like the Polynesian has great snacks. They have their own little tiki or Dole Whip
Yeah.
bar there, and Ohana is great. And I get no plugs, but Ohana is great, and it's great fun for breakfast. So no, I
And
love
see,
Holly.
we haven't been to Ohana and just now um people are talking about Ohana because they're like, oh, I've read about it here and there. So maybe that will be a future visit for us. Maybe we will find ourselves having an actual sit down meal because we're typically, quick service and we're walking around and things like that. But it's always a lot of fun. So um one more thing on the entertainment education, the podcast is it's fascinating. I've listened as episodes come out, depending when um, somebody listens to this episode of this podcast. It may be still some that are coming out. If you're listening in the future, well, then you'll be able to go back and listen to all of the episodes. And Alan does a really, really good job. It's a fascinating podcast. I've loved the episodes, learning about the different aspects that I don't know about. Health is one, that health education and kind of how you can, use entertainment to educate is something I think will be really, really interesting as well. And I've always heard that the most accurate representation of what it is to work in a hospital is, take a guess.
Is on a show, I bet.
Well, yeah, but what show? Do you know?
Oh, my guess would be great. Probably. Oh, ER maybe.
I have always heard it was Scrubs.
Oh, really?
That's like that was kind of the closest, like those kind of like because you have to, when you're working in such a heavy environment, you have to find
Yeah.
levity and you have to do things to like take your mind off of things and play tricks on people. So That was I have no idea if that someone who a doctor did not tell me that, a nurse did not tell me that, someone who works in a hospital, but it was like, I've always heard that people who work in the industry have said that's the closest representation. So we're about to do our rapid questions.
All
I have
right. I
seven
don't
of
know. I
them.
don't know if I'm ready. I'm ready. Hang on, hang on. Let me take a deep
Before we
breath.
do that, though, is there anything we've left out that you think we need to cover?
I think we hit it all. We hit the important things. Food. Food is always important. And we talked about food. We talked about how great of a relationship you and I have formed so far. We briefly mentioned my podcast, so that's good. And we briefly mentioned why entertainment education is important. Yeah, I think we touched it all.
This is a kind of a sneak peek into the being a fan of Disney, the podcast, how it operates is I will email someone or I will contact someone and say, let's talk about this. With Alan, I said, let's talk about the podcast, entertainment education, the podcast. And we probably spent 10-ish minutes going over that because I really need to, I probably should talk about those things the very first thing we talk about because by the time we get to those, we're running short on time. So um
However, it is all related. All aspects of everything that we talked about were related to how I got to this project today, I
yes,
will say. So you did bring it full circle, so I appreciate that.
thank you. All right, so rapid questions. These are
Okay.
ones that you can just give an answer and no explanation needed, and we'll take it at that. Or if you
To
want
qu-
to explain, you can explain.
to quote
And
Sophia from Golden Girls, who are the ink blots?
if you and if some of these you have multiple, that's okay too. So
Okay.
out of all of the parks you've been to, and by this I mean like actual gates, specific parks, not resorts like Walt Disney World versus Disneyland versus, do you have a favorite park?
For nostalgia, Magic Kingdom. For experience, Disneyland Paris. I thought the rides and experiences were on a different level than here in the States. And for food, Epcot.
Okay. All right. Out of all of the parks you've been to, what's your favorite attraction?
Easy, Haunted Mansion.
And
In every park and where it is in every park that I've been. To be fair, I haven't been to the Asian parks. So those
okay.
are the three that I have not hit. I've been to Disneyland Paris, Disneyland, and then Disney World. And so Haunted Mansion in all three parks and where it is in all three parks because it is different in all three parks.
The most fascinating thing behind the scenes to me about Haunted Mansion. First, I love Haunted Mansion because the first time I went with my wife, who we were dating at the time, that was her first trip. We went at the end of October because I was there on a conference, and it happened to be when Superstorm Sandy was moving up the East Coast.
Mm.
At that time, like President Obama was in Orlando and like left early because they thought like there was a chance maybe it would hit in deeper into Florida. So we went, and the combination of it being late in October and the potential for weather, it was almost empty. I mean, we walked in, we got there right after the park opened, and I had got it like worked out like, okay, we're gonna go to Magic Kingdom at the beginning, we're gonna go to Epcot in the middle, or the second part of that day. The next day, we're gonna try to go to Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios. Hopefully, we can fit everything because I hadn't been to Animal Kingdom. Um, but we walked in shortly after Rope Drop, and we walked right onto Jungle Cruise, which is unheard
Unheard
of.
of.
Pirates of the Caribbean. We were one of, I think maybe we might, I don't think we were the only people in the boat, but there may have been like two or three other people with us. I waited 10 minutes for Splash Mountain, I think. Um, a few minutes for Big Thunder Mountain. And then Haunted Mansion was my wife's uh the favorite attraction from that trip, at least. And it was kind of the one we got off of there. She's like, okay, I see. Like this is, yeah, this is not like other theme parks. This
Mhm.
is not an amusement park. I see what this is. It's amazing. So that's a really, really great memory. I love the aspect that in Disneyland, the stretching room is an elevator so
Mhm.
that you can move underneath the train tracks to get to the show building. They didn't have that problem in Walt Disney World, so it at the ceiling actually goes up. And is it Disneyland Paris that it's both? The ceiling goes up and you go down a little bit, or is it?
Correct.
I thought so.
Yes.
So I love like those technical aspects of it as well.
Yes. And it's always the door is always Sally the tightrope walker.
The what?
The door is always Sally the tightrope walker. That's the door that opens and lets you into the hallway.
See, that's one that I always get wrong. If I'm trying to get to the ride quickly, I always get that one wrong.
No,
So
always
typically
go to Sally.
it's we and when we walk in, we try to stay in the dead center of the room because that's the best. That's the best view.
Pun
So
intended.
yes. All right, favorite hotel anywhere you stayed at a lot. Do you have a favorite hotel on any property?
Yes. Oh, wow. Well, like I mentioned, Polynesian has a special place in my heart because we got married there. If I had to just go make a quick trip, I love French Quarter. French Quarter is real good because they have beignets. That's I love the beignets there. So yeah, I think those two are probably my two favorite.
Okay. I now am partial to any hotel, any resort that's on the Skyliner. I love the Skyliner.
Yes,
It is so
any
amazing to be able to
Skyliner
take that
resort is
around.
great. Yeah.
I hope they expand that to. It would be amazing if it were to every single resort. I know that is quite impossible, but at least expand it out toward like the Animal Kingdom resorts. Get it out to, get it out to like the all-star resorts because it is a little bit tougher to get from those places, I know.
Yeah, because
Um,
they only share one bus.
yeah. So two more questions, and then we'll get to some that are more specific to what we've talked about today. Anywhere on property, any property you've been to, any of the parks could include Disney Village, Downtown Disney, Disney Springs also. Do you have a favorite restaurant?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Wow. Ooh. I'm gonna do top three because I can't choose a favorite.
Okay.
No. Um, for breakfast, I do love me some Topolino's Terrace. Boma for breakfast is also really good. For lunch, I like Trattoria Al Forno is really good. For dinner, you get Flying Fish, California Grill. Oh gosh, I'm keep like, oh man. No. So to answer your question, no, I just like to eat.
And then other than restaurants, favorite snack when you're at a Disney
Uh,
park?
spring rolls.
Okay.
Spring rolls at Magic Kingdom. If I'm going sweet, churro.
Okay.
And if I'm at Disneyland, you got to try any of the specialty churros of the whatever moment they have going on. When I went, they were just celebrating the 100th. So they had this 100th churro with like chocolate and marshmallow and it was like a s'more and it was all over my face, but it was the best thing I ever ate. It was delicious. So savory spring rolls, sweet churro.
Are you someone who believes the churros are different at Disneyland and Magic King and Walt Disney World? Are they better at Disneyland?
They are better at Disneyland, and so are the corn dogs. The corn dogs are different at Disneyland. Yeah, also.
Hmm.
Some would argue the popcorn. I think the popcorn's pretty comparable.
The one thing that we do up until, I don't know, probably 2019, I had not had a Dole Whip, and I absolutely love it. I have
Mhm.
multiples of Dole Whip whenever we go. Um, and it used to be the Mickey ice cream bar. Now you can get that in stores, so it's not as
Yeah.
much, but it is better in the park. They do taste a little better in the park. I can't remember. I don't think we had a churro when we were in Disneyland. But one thing I do probably once a trip is um, I'll look for if there's a popcorn bucket that I want. Like I can see the Millennium Falcon hanging up, part of it hanging up behind you.
Yeah.
When we were in Disneyland, the find was the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. They had a
Oh,
popcorn bucket of his.
I just packed him up
Yeah.
because
And
I'm moving down, well, by you. So, but yeah,
yeah,
no, I just packed him up. I do have a Mr. Toad.
it's such a cool one, and it was also it was an adventure thinking, how am I going to get this back on the, how am I going to pack this to get it back on the plane? And ultimately just taking the chance of, well, I guess if an arm's broken off, you can glue it back. Luckily, that didn't happen. I had some
So
help
to
packing,
you,
so it was safe.
as I say to you and any of your listeners, the hint, because I take a lot of, I'm a Disney merchandise junkie. I'm a sucker. Put the Disney logo on it and I'll buy it. I swear. Um, Take your clothes and wrap it in like a t-shirt,
Yeah.
and it gives it that extra protection.
And what I found is you can put things if you put things in the bucket also, give it a little extra security
Uh,
inside, a little extra structure inside. So the last two, these are ones that, at least in my view, are somewhat more specific to communication and studying the parks. And do you have a favorite themed land? And if you need to, you could go with like the traditional, like we talk about the five traditional ones at the castle parks, and then you could go with, newer because technology is what it is now. Like you have lands like Batu and Avengers Campus, Cars Land, and things like that. What do you have a favorite land?
yeah, I would, again, for nostalgia reasons, I would probably say Disneyland's Fantasyland.
Okay.
Because we still have Mr. Toad over there. I love Mr. Toad. You're just talking about the bucket, and it's so stupid. But he's so classic and so fun, and I love it. Um, the Pinocchio and Alice, and there's just so much nostalgia in Fantasyland over there that I love. And I love It's a Small World so much more in Disneyland because I just think it's so much more beautiful. The facade outside, and you start
Hmm.
outside and everything. It's very similar in Paris too. You go outside for a little bit as well. But you are right. These new and upcoming technologies have changed a lot, especially in Galaxy's Edge and Avengers Campus. Avengers Campus in Paris is pretty incredible the way they took their rock and roller coaster and rethemed it to an Iron Man kind of coaster. And um seeing like the Stark technologies kind of
Hmm.
coming to real life was so cool. So you're right. You do have to take this kind of twofold original and emerging, I guess you could say, as things are changing. How's that?
Good, good. And then last one, and it could be one, it could be multiple ones if it needs to be, a favorite narrative in the parks. So it could be, narrative that runs through a whole themed land, runs through a whole park. It could be narrative of specific attractions, a favorite
You
narrative
know,
in the parks.
you kind of mentioned this briefly a little bit, and I agreed with it. I would say the original narrative of the Imagination Pavilion, what Figment and Dreamfinder were put there to do, help people create, and help expand their imaginations. I love that. I wish they would do one of those kind of back hauls, kind of like what they're doing with Test Track and bringing some of
Hmm.
Horizons back with it. Um, but I think it still tells such a whimsical tale of how thinking and being creative can help you become not necessarily a better person, but a more articulate and a more, you know, functioning member of a conversation.
Yeah. The Figment and Dreamfinder have always been important to me because it is kind of that reminder to hold on to your imagination. Let your imagination kind of help you when where it can, which is an amazing kind of storyline and narrative to me. So I agree with you. I also, I look forward to, and it's always every D23, people say, oh, something's going to be announced about the Imagination Pavilion. And I wonder now specifically with the success of Inside Out 2,
Mhm.
um, and that franchise, that is one of the greatest Pixar movies to me. That the way they teach people about psychology and about
Mhm.
emotions, and it's just fantastic.
Mhm.
Um, but I've heard rumors that, hey, maybe that would be something that they would actually use because Figment does make a, he does make an appearance in Inside Out. So Figment could still be in there. I would love if they brought back the Dreamfinder. He was such a cool character. I think if they did, maybe, and there's the rumor that there's supposed to be a Figment movie in development.
Yeah, I heard that.
Who knows? Maybe they will kind of have a Dreamfinder-esque or Dreamfinder character in it.
Mhm.
Um, it would be really, really interesting. So the Marvel comics that they did
You
on
you
Figment
know,
were really, really
I just
fascinating.
I just happen to have a copy.
Yeah.
Uh, no, Jim. Actually, funny. I got to meet Jim Zub, who drew
Okay.
them at a Comic-Con, and he was the coolest, most like genuine guy. And there's such a different story that these Marvel comics tell that I think could, tell a good movie. Hopefully, they'll bring that if the movie does come to fruition. Um, and like you said, maybe bring to the Imagination Pavilion.
Yeah, and I will say I'm a huge fan of Marvel of the MCU, I really should say. Um the acquisition of Marvel, the MCU is obviously front and center because it has made the company so much money. And it is such a cool thing to me, even the projects that people don't really like or haven't watched. And yes, there have been too many projects on Disney Plus and things like that. I know that it's hard for people to keep up with. Um, but I love all of those. I think one of the most creative aspects of that acquisition was creating comics on the different pavilions and the different attractions at the Disney parks. They're
Yeah.
all really, really good. They're all really, really fun to read. So, and if you don't have a copy, they are available on Marvel Unlimited also. So they're a lot of fun to get through. So that's it. That that's what we have time for. We're actually over time. Surprise, surprise with me. But Alan, thank you so much for joining and talking about your fandom, talking about your research, the podcast, and everybody be on the lookout for Entertainment Education, the podcast. It's available on most podcast sites, right? Or all podcasts. I listen through
Yep.
Apple Podcast, and it updates every week when a new one's released. So
Yep,
really,
absolutely.
really
If
great to
you
have you here.
Thank you so much again, Cody. If you go to our Facebook or Instagram, I got the link tree on there. You can just click on it. And like you said, it's on pretty much all the major platforms.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Have a great rest
Thank
of the
you,
day.
Cody. I appreciate you, and thank you to your listeners.
Yeah. Bye.